Okay, we're recording now. Let's see, Dad, could you tell us a little bit about your trip overseas?
Well, I don't know where we left from or anything, but it was 18 days when we went up north to keep out of the German submarines path. So we played cards on deck for 18 days,
Mm-hmm.
and it was nice weather. And all we had to get up for was chow. And most of the people had to line up for chow, but we didn't. So we just sat there and played cards for 18 days.
Mm-hmm.
And the weather was nice, and there was hardly any ships around us anywhere. So we were pretty much by ourselves.
And what time of year was that?
Well, it was in the fall.
And that was 1944, is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Was there much danger of the German subs at that time?
Well, yeah, that's why we went up north.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we'd have taken a straight shot,
Right.
and probably would have cut the time in half, or maybe even less than that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we made it. I don't know whether that was the time we got rammed by the sub or not, or the destroyer.
And what that was, well, like how many ships were you with when you were going over? How big was the group?
I don't know.
Okay. But the destroyer, was that like the big escort, basically? Or?
Well, it was, I suppose, but it was foggy. It was foggy, and we got rammed by the destroyer. So we lived in England when we started taking on water.
Mm-hmm.
And the camp was Tidworth. I can't tell you where it was, but we were there for about 2 weeks,
Uh-huh.
cleaning up our equipment and getting ready to go over to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, it was foggy over there every night, and we had to use a chalk line to go to the PX.
And the PX is like a kitchen or mess hall or something, or
Yeah.
store, or
Yeah.
okay.
And I had charge of, I was a buck sergeant at the time, and they picked me for latrine sergeant. And inspection every day. And of course it was an outside bathroom, well,
Oh, an outhouse or something, or
yeah, just about, yeah.
yeah.
And this inspector was from England. He was an officer, and he said, "Sergeant," he said, "I want these toilets so clean you could eat off them." And I said, "Well, if you want to eat off them, you go right ahead." And he looked at me and he said, "You can't talk to me like that." And I said, "I just did." So that was the end of that.
Yeah.
But and then it was cold over there, and of course we slept in tents. And this company barber, Brookmeyer was his name. He had a habit of wetting the bed. He wanted to get out of the army, and so one night I was sergeant of the guard, and I said, "I'll fix that fella." So he wet the bed, and he come to me and he said, "Sarge, I wet the bed." I said, "Crawl back in there." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Crawl back in that bed." He said, "It's wet." I said, "Crawl back in." And I said, "Maybe you won't wet the bed tomorrow night,
Mm-hmm.
if you have to sleep in there tonight." And it worked.
I suppose so. Yeah.
Yeah. He was with us over in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
He never got to go home.
And so, see, you crossed the English Channel to get to France. That's how you
Yeah.
hit the European continent, right?
Yeah,
What was that like,
well,
crossing the Channel?
We took our tanks from Tidworth to Le Havre, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the captain told me before we left, he said, now if you have trouble on the way, Sergeant, he said, just drop out. And he said, the tank recovery outfits will not take care of you. He said, you will be joining up with a different outfit. And I thought, well, okay. So sure enough, one engine conked out on the way over. And so we pulled off, and the tank recovery unit came along, and I flagged him down. And he said, Sarge, I'm sorry, but we can't pick you up. And I said, I just talked to the captain. And he said, you were supposed to pick me up and take me to the port of debarkation, Le Havre. And he said, well, if the captain said that, okay.
And so this was in France?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, well, it was in England, I suppose.
Oh, okay.
But we were going to Le Havre.
Oh, yeah.
And so anyway, I didn't know whether to pee my pants or what, you know, when he hooked on to me. So he loaded me up, and he's shaking his head all the time, and he said, I don't think this is right, but he said, you said the captain said so, so I said, yep, that's what he said.
Mm-hmm.
So we got down there, and here was the captain. And he said, Sergeant, he said, I told you at the time that if you ever dropped out, don't flag down the recovery units. And I said, what did you say? Well, he said, now that you're here, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because they hadn't loaded up yet.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So, I don't know whether that was the time we put a new engine in the tank. And we pulled in, that was in France. Yeah, that was a different time. But anyway, I joined my outfit.
And your tank itself, that was powered by 2 Cadillac V8s, is that right? Mm-hmm.
But one time an engine clonked out, and they had to put in a new one. So we pulled in a courtyard over in France, and it was walled in, you know. And they had it about halfway in, and here comes the Germans overhead. And the first time I ever saw a jet, I didn't know what they were.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just bzzz, and they were gone, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out later they were German jets.
So that was a jet as opposed to the prop airplane?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know what they were,
Oh, yeah.
but they didn't bomb us or anything. They went so damn fast that you didn't know what they were.
And your tanks were, they were some of the smaller tanks, right?
Yep, M4.
M4?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were howitzers.
What's a howitzer?
Well, shoot it just like a grenade, you know, over a hill.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't a long rifle or anything.
Mm-hmm.
They were short. They only had about a 2-foot barrel on.
Mm-hmm.
And you could shoot, you know, just about over a hill like this and drop it right down.
Oh, yeah. And the reason it was small is that because of the special operations that you did, like...
Recon.
Yeah, reconnaissance?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We were the first ones to get out. Before the infantry, we used to pick up infantrymen on the way and scout out the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we were, recon.
Yeah. How big of a group did you go with? Were there vehicles that went with you on the recon? Or?
Well, there was 8 tanks in a company,
Mm-hmm.
in a troop, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And they each had a half-track and a jeep. And that was all. I mean, 4 platoons in each company.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the 4th platoon. So there was 2 tanks, 2 half-tracks, 2 jeeps, and 8 men, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, more than that with the half tracks, yeah.
So would you do a lot of this at night or in the daytime, or what?
Day and night, you know.
Okay.
Wherever we were needed.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall some of your experiences there in the recon?
Well, yeah, there was a lot of them, but
What was the weather like over there?
about like here.
Mm-hmm.
Over in France, it was colder than hell. 42 below one morning, and we had to start our tanks every half hour during the night to keep them running.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could start one engine, and if you went ahead, you could start the other one off of the one,
Mm-hmm.
but not backing up.
Mm-hmm.
So one time we got counterattacked, and sure enough, one engine didn't start. So I had an ammunition trailer on back, couldn't back up.
Mm-hmm.
So we finagled around, and the Germans were coming up the hill on foot. And so I had the gunner load up the 50 caliber machine gun with tracers. Every fourth one was a tracer.
And what is a tracer?
Well, it fire over your head.
Mm-hmm.
So when he got done loading it up, I had him start firing over their heads. And he'd fire 3, and then the tracer would go. And boy, when that tracer went, they hit the ground. And they stayed there. So I had him keep on firing. And I had the tank driver unhook the ammunition trailer and jiggle the levers around.
Mm-hmm.
So he got the tank turned around. And as soon as he got it turned around, he started downhill, and then the other engine started. So I motioned for the boys to, come on, let's get the hell out of here. So we left the ammunition trailer there, and we picked it up later.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, that term counterattacked, what does that exactly mean?
Well, it means that the Germans, we were whole defilade, you know. It means that all you were sticking out was me and the gun.
Mm-hmm.
And the Germans were coming up the hill. That's whole defilade. They were coming pretty fast up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Fast as they could walk anyway, carrying ammunition and so on. But we got out of there.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then one time we pulled into a place, I think that was in Germany, and the captain called us in, and he said, now there's no Germans within miles. He said, so you take this town, you take this one, so on. And so I took a little town, and I think I had a half-track in the Jeep with me. And so we pulled into this little town, and it probably was 100 people,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 200, I don't know. But anyway, there wasn't much there.
Was that town officially surrendered by that time, or?
Yeah, pretty well. Not really. They didn't have any white sheets out or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as the captain said they'd all checked out and they were all safe, there was no Germans. So we pulled in, and so I backed into a garage like we usually do, and so the tank was out of sight, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't too long, shells started coming in.
German shells?
Yeah, and I didn't know what they were.
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe they couldn't be German because the captain told us there wasn't any Germans around.
Mm-hmm.
But we finally figured out they were German artillery.
Mm-hmm.
And so the place we were billeted at there was a big basement in this one building that probably held 300 people. And it was all cement. And the whole town came over when they started shelling and crawled in that basement. So I don't know how many steps there were going upstairs, but there was a lot of them. So we went down there too when the shells started coming pretty fast. And then they quit for a while. So I ran up the steps and took my glasses and picked out where I thought they were coming from. Well, then they started coming again. So I run down in the basement again, and then they quit, and I ran upstairs, and then I figured out where they were coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't too far away. And then I looked around town, and there was a church steeple. It was the only highest point in town. And so I went down the basement and I said, does anybody speak English down here? And one lady had been to school in the United States, and she could speak English. And I said, I want you to tell these people that those are not American shells, they're German. And I said, there's only one place in town that would have a place for a forward observer. And I said, that's the church steeple. And I said, you tell them that unless that firing quits, that I'm going to blow that church down a little bit at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Start at the top and blow it down. And I said, I'll take it all the way down if it doesn't stop. So she did, she told him. And so I went upstairs, and sure enough, the shells started coming in. And pretty soon they quit.
Mm-hmm.
Just like that. And I said to this girl, I said, no, I said, that tells me that somebody's getting the message. And I said, I know where those guns are. And I said, I'm going to send some men over there. So I picked a guy from Missouri. His name was Private Hale, I think. And I said, you pick 2 more men. And I said, you get over there and find out who's shelling us. And so he took off. Pretty soon he came back, and he said, Sarge, you won't have any more trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what was it? Well, he said, there's 2 German Wrens, whacks.
What's a Wren?
Well, they were German girls, you know, that were in uniform, and they were firing a ground mount. And he said, you won't have any more trouble with him. He said, we killed them both. He said, Sarge, I shot one of them right through the tit. And I believe he did too, because he was the only man I knew that could sneak up on a snake and pick it up, you know, when it was on the run, and snap his head against a tree or something. Gray was his name, Gray. PFC Gray.
Mm-hmm. What all countries did you go to there?
Oh, we went through Belgium and Holland and Germany and France and Czechoslovakia, Belgium. I guess about all of them.
Mm-hmm. Was it always your intention to get to Germany, to Berlin, or did you just go wherever you needed to go? Or
yeah, up in the Harz Mountains one time, we were up in there, and they were supposed to be cleaned out pretty well. So I just took the tank, and we got up and we found a big resort, hunting lodge.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one caretaker there. And there was guns all over everything. And hunting rifles, you know. And so I made this fellow understand what we were, and he knew. And I told him, I said, does any of these guns fire? Well, he said, you know, maybe they do, maybe they don't. So some guys were in the basement, and they found
Keep going.
a bunch of ammunition. And so they come up and reported to me, and I said, what will they fit? Well, they were pretty new stuff. So I said, take down all these rifles, stack them outside. And boy, there were some of them worth thousands of dollars, you know. And the old fellow looked at me and he said, what are you doing, you know? And I said, we're going to take these outside. And I said, the boys found ammunition down in your basement. And I said, we're going to put the ammunition first, and then the guns on top. And then I said, we're going to have the tank get up on top and spin the wheels just as hard as you can. And then I said, we're going to burn them. You wouldn't. I said, you wait and see. So that's what we did. And so when we got to the place where the tank came down off the top of the pile, you know, they were pretty well beat up.
Yeah.
And I said, now, have you got any gas, Hank? And he says, we've got those 2 cans you've been standing on. He said, they were German gas tanks.
And Hank was your tank driver? Or?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And he said, you didn't tell us to use them. And I said, no, because I stood on them. And, well, he said, they're full yet. And I said, well, get them out of there. And I said, put them on that pile, scatter them around. And then I said, light it. And I said, get your tank out of here. So he got the tank from here to the halfway to the golf club. And so now I said to the boys, I said, torch those. And they lit them on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, let's get the hell out of here. So that was the end of that.
Oh, yeah. Because those could have been used as weapons against the Allies then?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
They could have been used against us, you know.
All right, yeah.
Well, then, one time, you know, maybe that was on the way over there. No. Yeah, it had to be. Everybody was sick in the ship, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Seasick. Except me. So I volunteered for KP.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing to it. There was nobody eating.
Oh, yeah.
So when I'd get done at night, I'd take about half a dozen sandwiches with me down the hole, you know. And I told them I'd sleep down there with the sick ones. And so when I got him down there, I said, boys, do you want a sandwich? So I laid there and ate the sandwiches. But one time we got shelled somehow. The Germans figured out where we were.
Was this on the boat? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And or maybe the aircraft or something. But anyway, I think I was in the 3rd hole down. There was 5 holes in the ship, and I was in the 3rd one or middle one or something. And you know, boy, oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to go up to the kitchen and see what was going on. And here the captain passed me on the way upstairs. And he fell down. And he gave himself the Purple Heart. So I didn't say anything at the time. But after he got the Purple Heart, why, I saw him and I said, "Where'd you get that Purple Heart, Captain?" And he gave me a cock and bull story about this, and I said, "You're lying." I said, "You got that from going upstairs and falling down." I said, "You were scared, more scared than I was." And I said, "You passed me on the steps." And I said, "That's when you fell down." And I said, "You turned yourself in for a Purple Heart, so you get 5 points." But anyway, one time I was on KP upstairs in the kitchen, in the mess hall, and the ship was, and the doors were about 3 inches thick, steel.
Yeah,
heavy.
yeah.
And so I said to the mess sergeant, he was a black fellow, and I said, "Is there anything you want me to do before I go downstairs and sleep?" And he says, "You can go up and dump the garbage can if you want." And I thought that was kind of strange, with the ship going. But he seemed sincere, so I said, "Okay." So I got up there and the wind was blowing and the ship was rocking. And the deck was greasy, from the garbage can being there. And the garbage can was chained to the deck.
Mm-hmm.
So it couldn't go over the deck. And so anyway, I went to dump the can, and about that time the wind came up and blew the whole thing, out of my hands, and me with it slipped on the deck. And I was just about ready to go overboard, and I put my arms up like this, and I caught the bottom rail on the ship. There was a rail going all the way around. Well, there was 2 of them. One about 1.5 feet off the ground, another one about 3 feet. And I caught this one, and I was hanging on the side of the boat like this. And when it went back the other way, I let go, and I slid back. And I got a hold of the ship. And the next time it went over, then I was okay. So the next time it went back, I got the door open. And I got inside, and here was this black fella. And I looked at him and I said, "You black son of a bitch." I said, "Sending me up there, to dump that garbage." And I said, "You knew that I couldn't make it, didn't you?" And he says, "Well, I figured you couldn't." I said, "I fooled you."
Yeah, that sounds like a close call.
You partner didn't have a father.
So was there coordination between like your reconnaissance squads and any air support or any other?
The captain probably had support with it, but we didn't have any. One time we were firing, there was a second lieutenant, I think he was in the company, F company. We were E troop and they were F company. And he was going to lay in a battery one time, and that was about the end of the war.
What do you mean by lay in a battery?
Kind of like a artillery outfit. And he had us line up 8 tanks, and he was going to fire at some point over here, school bus, I think. And he had me, I was the 4th tank, I think, and he had me kind of in a desolate position, that nobody could see me. And so he was calling the signals, line up on him or so on. And he was laying us in. And about that time I was looking around with my field glasses, and I spied some Germans across the river. And there was a bunch of them going into a house. and these were uniformed, you know,
Oh, the soldiers?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and so I hollered to Eli, I said, can you see what I see? And he said, those Germans over there? And I said, yeah. He said, they're going in that house. I said, break out of the firing line here and fire one over there. And I gave him the range and everything, and I said, now fire. And he did. Well, then they started going through the house and coming out the other side. And I said, turn your gun. And I said, fire one ahead of him. And I said, drive him back in the house. So he did. And they went back in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I counted 32 of them. And now I said, when they got all in the house and nobody around, I said, knock the house down. I said, fire 2 rounds in there. And boy, wood flew all over, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And now I said, burn it. So he did.
And how could he do that?
Well, they had incendiary bombs.
Oh, uh-huh.
And in the tank, you know. And we'd never used one before. But we fired one in that
Mhm.
round. So then we got back and in the firing position. And I guess we took off then. Yeah, everybody took off. And when we got back in, the second lieutenant, he said, Sergeant, he said, have your tank checked when you get back in. He said, I never did see your firing.
Hmm.
They had fired without me, see, because we were busy
Oh, yeah.
firing over. But he couldn't see that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yes, sir. And so I just put my fingers through my mouth, you know, and said, boys, forget about it. We got 32 of them that day.
Mm-hmm.
32 Germans. But nobody knew about that.
Did you get to be fairly good friends with the guys in your tank, or the other guys in the other tank of the half track? Or
Well, yeah, the tank crew was just like brothers, you know.
mm-hmm.
This John Bear was from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'd met his wife, well, girlfriend and wife. But Henry Fear was from Denver, Colorado. He was a tank driver, and he was the oldest man in the outfit.
How old was he?
You know, he was 37 or 30,
Uh-huh.
and he was well, if you were going on a trip, he took care of all the arrangements, you know.
Hmm. Oh, a travel agent?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
In civilian life?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so the only place that he ever looked was when we got into a place was for white gloves.
Mm-hmm.
He was always looking for white gloves to wear on his hands. But he was a good one, and he could drive that tank. And the gunner was he was a Syrian, Eli Kalo.
Mm-hmm. Was he an American citizen? Or?
Well, I think he was. Yeah, he couldn't have been in it if he wasn't.
Uh-huh.
But I think he still had ties with
Syria, which is a country in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And maybe he was a rebel. I don't know.
Hmm.
He didn't. Well, if he went to church, why he didn't say anything to the rest of us. He just went. And but he did a good job, and he was smart. Boy, he was smart. Eli Kalo.
And what was his position in the tank?
Gunner.
Gunner, okay. Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was the assistant gunner. If something happens to the gunner, then I had to take over.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way with John Bear was the loader. But if something happened to the tank driver, he was the tank driver.
Oh, yeah. Because your usual position was commander of the tank, right?
Yeah. And we were the only ones that stood up.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of them could sit down, but we couldn't. We had to stand up. There was no place for us to sit.
Mm-hmm.
And just our head stuck out so we could observe, you know. But that's about all I've got.
Could you talk about that bloodstone ring you have? You got that in the war, is that right?
Yeah. We were at a place one day where they were digging the German civilians were digging a trench to bury the German dead in. And I don't know, I spoke to one of these Germans, and he was telling me that he used to own a jewelry store in that town.
Mm-hmm.
And we got talking, and I guess I had a sandwich and I offered him some, and he didn't have anything to eat for probably a week or so,
Mm-hmm.
but he ate it anyway. And so it got time to leave, and so I said to the old fellow, I said, it's time for us to go. So I said, it's been nice talking to you, or something like that. And he said, Sergeant, he said, I kept a few rings from my jewelry store. And he said, I want you to have one, because
Mm-hmm.
he said, you gave me something to eat. And I said, okay. So he come and he had a little box full of rings.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, take your choice. So I picked out that one. And I said, this is fine. And he said, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I'm glad you got it.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's how I got the ring.
Yeah. And then crossing the Rhine was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Because everybody had to cross the Rhine to get either to Berlin, I guess, which
Yeah.
was your goal at the time.
Yeah, and Ed Ryan he went to the army with us, but he didn't stay. He went to STP or something like that, school
Mm-hmm.
in La Crosse. And I never saw him again until we were crossing the Rhine. And he was with the combat engineers. And he was standing on the bridge. They had just completed it. And there was 4 tanks ahead of me, of course. 3, 4. And then I come up. And I looked and I said, hi, Ed. Hi, Cod. Just like that. That's all we said.
Was there German resistance at the time as far as crossing the Rhine goes?
Oh, boy. She was hot and heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And then one time we were going across the pontoon bridge and they had mine tape on both sides. And of course the minesweeper had been through there, and that was the limit, you know.
So that, yeah, the mine tape was, I guess, the safe boundaries that you
Yeah.
could drive through?
And so we got on there and our tank quit.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Hank, get her going. And he finally got her started. And about that time, there was a gap ahead, and of course, there was 1,000 of them behind, you know, that I could see.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Hank, I said, the tank ahead of us was disabled, and there wasn't room to go around it. So I said, Hank, dismount. What are you going to do, Sarge? And I said, I'm going to move that mine tape and pull this tank around that. And he said, if you go, I go.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay. So I got down off of there and I guided him just as close as I could to the other tank. And I said, now give her hell, Hank. We made it. So then the rest of them followed, you know. But that was about, well, I think about as close to that going overboard that with the mess kit
Oh.
at that time that I ever.
What did you know about the Germans at the time, like their weapons and stuff? Whether
I didn't know anything about it.
mm-hmm.
No. I guess we didn't have time to worry about their weapons.
Yeah. Did you see some of their tanks? I understand some of them were pretty big.
Well, I saw some of them that were mounted on a flat car one time.
Mm-hmm.
Guns pointed both ways, you know. The tanks were disabled, but the guns were still.
Oh yeah.
And but that was about the only thing that I ever saw.
Mm-hmm.
One time we saw a German tank that was, well, it was going up a hill. And I think we had men on top of the hill. And I said to the boys, I said, something wrong here. I said, that German tank is going up to fire on our boys. And this one, I think it was PFC, he said, they won't make it. And I said, what do you mean? And he had a tie, like a railroad tie, you know. And he said, wait, he said, get some help. So he got two guys to help him, and they took it over and they threw it underneath that tank, that German tank, so it couldn't move, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It just could back up a little ways and go ahead a little ways, but as soon as it hit that tie, it was stopped.
Yeah.
And they couldn't figure out what was going on. So I suppose that kept on for 5 minutes, you know. And finally I said, why don't you fellas put those Germans out of their misery? And I said, then we won't be bothered with those anymore. So they killed them, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just like that.
Well, we're glad you made it back.
Yeah. And, you know, after the war, why the captain came to Sergeant Hale and I, well, it was right at the end of the war. There was still a war going on, and he says, I'm turning you fellows in for battlefield commission.
And what does that mean?
Well, it means a second lieutenant.
It's a promotion to officer, basically. Uh-huh.
And I said to Sergeant Hale, I said, do you want that? He said, no. Well, I said, I don't either. I said, I want to go home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he said, that's the way with me. So the captain was all hot and bothered, you know. And I said, you kind of changed your mind about me, didn't you, Captain? What do you mean? I said, on that Purple Heart deal that time, I said, that still bugs me. And he said, oh, I forgot about that. Well, I said, I didn't. And I said, do you want to get home, Captain? And he said, yes, I do. Well, I said, you know, if you turn us in for a battlefield commission, I said, you're going to lose us. I said, we're going to the South Pacific. I said, that's why they want us to be officers. I said, so they can ship us out. And I said, that's going to leave you with Sergeant Zarkowitz and Sergeant Larson. And I said, do you want those fellows to take you home? Oh, no. Well, I said, then you better not send us to Battlefield Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, forget it. So, we forgot it. And then after the war, I was at a place one time where you were a high point man, you could, you could pick your own position, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got in this one outfit and he said, have you got a preference, Sarge? And I said, yeah. I said, I think I'll take Mess Sergeant.
Mess
Good.
Sergeant? Uh-huh.
Mess Sergeant. And he said, that's a good idea. He said, we don't get enough to eat. And I said, why? Well, he didn't say. And I said, I'll keep my eyes open. So the cooks, our cooks, they were sleeping with the German girls over there.
Mm.
And that's where the food was going.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 2 days, why I said something to the boys. I said, tonight we're going to have beef stew. And I said, I want some beef in it.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of them looked at each other and we don't have any. And I said, you better have. I said, we got in rations yesterday. And I said, there was beef in there yesterday. Now I said, either you tell me where it's gone or else we're going to have beef stew tonight. So they told me that they were sleeping with these German girls. And I said, that's too bad. I said, those girls are going to go hungry from now on. I said, from now on, I said, we're checking in everything off of that supply truck.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had all kinds of grub, you know, food. And the officers were even coming over and eating. And so one day I said to the officers, I said, fellas, I said, there's something wrong here. I said, you fellas are, you know, you get chow at your mess hall. And I said, you're eating here. How come? Well, it's better chow. And I said, why? Well, they didn't know. And I said, I'll tell you why. I said, this place didn't have good chow either, till I got here.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I straightened that out. And I said, unless you fellas get your rations transferred over here, I said, no more chow.
Mm-hmm.
And the one captain looked at me and he said, you can't talk to us like that. I said, I'm sorry, sir, but I just did. And I said, I meant it. And the next day, there wasn't an officer showed up. And we had good chow from then on.
Mm-hmm.
But I was there about, I suppose, you never knew how long you were there. Because, I mean, maybe they needed high point men someplace else on the way home.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was high point. So I kept floating around.
Mm-hmm.
And on the way home one time, we come up through, we landed in New York and went up through Canada and down. Why, I don't know, because the trains were busy, I suppose, in the city. But anyway, we got up into one little town in Canada, and everybody wanted a drink, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Including me. And there was probably 500 guys ahead of me at this bar. So I didn't bother going in line or anything. I thought, well, I'll take a walk. And I walked around, not even a block. And there was a tavern, nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked in and there was still nobody there. And the bartender finally came over and he said, what can I do for you? And I told him I wanted a drink. And he said, why don't you come in the back room? And here was the whole train crew. And The second lieutenant in charge of the train told us, he lined us up outside. He said, now you got an hour or so. But he said, be back here 10 minutes of or something like that. And he said, not any later. So anyway, I went back in with the train crew and they were having lunch. And so I had lunch with them and I had a drink or two and nothing, I couldn't pay for anything, you know. And so I told him, I said, no, I got to get back. I said, it's been nice talking to you fellas, but I said, I got to get back to the train. Well, this engineer said, you can't leave without us. And I said, I know that. But I said, the lieutenant, well, he said, I know what the lieutenant said. But he said, why don't you stick around? He said, you can walk back with us. So after about 10 minutes, well, he said, come on, boys. Let's go back. So we gets back just about to the train, and here was the second lieutenant. And he ate my rear end out from one stem. And he said, Sergeant, he said, I was going to turn you in for being AWOL. He said, you weren't back here at your appointed time. And I looked at my watch and I said, I've still got a minute left. And he looked at me and he said, not according to mine. And I said, I'm going by mine. And I said, that's Army time. And so then the engineer came up and he said, you having a little trouble here, Sarge? And I said, yeah. I said, this fellow said that I'm not back on time or something like that. Well, he said, maybe he would like to drive this train. He said, I'm the engineer. And he said, you can't leave without me. And so the guy calmed down. And I went in my train station and sat down in the train. And I could see that this second lieutenant was pretty hot yet. And before I said goodbye to the engineer, he said, you're going to have trouble with that second lieutenant. And I said, no, it's over. No, he said, it isn't. He said, he's going to call you. And he says, find out about this deal. So he said, let me know. So I didn't think anything about it. Sure enough, the second lieutenant came over to me one time and he said, Sergeant, he said, step out on the veranda here where we can talk. And he had two guys with him, great big. And so I got out there and he said, now tell me what happened. And I said, you know all about it. No, I said, not according to that. He said, I want your view. And I said, well, that's it. And about that time, the engineer came on. And we were the first car back at the engine. And he said, Sergeant, he said, are you having trouble again? And I said, no, not really. I said, the second lieutenant here wants to know what happened. And he says, I told him. I said, but he doesn't believe that. And this guy walks up to the second lieutenant and he said, you don't believe me? And he says, I'm driving this train. And he said, do you want to get where you're going? And the second lieutenant didn't know what to say. And he said, I'll tell you. He said, Sergeant, you get back to your seat. And he said, Lieutenant, you get back to yours. And he said, I don't want to hear you talking to him again. And that was the end of it.
Oh, we're about out of battery here almost. Any final comments?
No, that's enough.
All right, well, thank you.